Last week, we listened in as Job and Satan made a deal. Today, as God and Satan made a deal. Today, we hear Job speak. Scripture tells us that after God had made the heavens and the earth, God looked at creation and said, "It is good. It is good." The first of the four noble truths of Buddhism teaches: birth is ill, decay is ill, sickness is ill, death is ill, life is suffering. You and I live our abundant lives vacillating between these two perspectives. It's a beautiful day. Why didn't I get that job I wanted? It's a beautiful day. Why didn't I get that spouse I wanted? It's a beautiful day. I love Southern California. Why does my nose look like my father's? We desire to have a good and happy life. And such a desire is not out of the question. In fact, in the 10th chapter of the Gospel of John, Jesus said, "I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly." Job had an abundant life. Wife, family, land, cattle, health. Job had it all. But through circumstances over which Job had no control, Job endured terrible, unbelievable suffering, and he was frightened and he was mad. Job lifts his voice in frustration. He wants his day in court. Because you see, Job believes that a reasonable and upright person could make headway with God. But you, knowing what you know and living through what you have lived, you might ask, Job, who do you think you are to take on the creator of the universe? Scripture says humans are created a little lower than the angels, which means we must be created a lot lower than God. Job, there have been people throughout history to whom unbelievable tragedy has fallen. Abel, all of the early church martyrs, Joan of Arc, Marie Antoinette, Anne Boleyn, the indigenous peoples of America, those lost in the Middle Passage, and those who survived the Middle Passage. The Kennedy family, 9/11 victims, the victims and surviving families of ongoing school shootings. The New York family that lost 4 daughters in an illegal limousine ride. The tragedies that each one of you sitting in this room have endured. Job. Preachers have preached to people like you that the faith journey of those that have endured misfortune is to use their horrible tragedy to draw closer to God. So Job, in many faith traditions, you are way out of line here. Job, sing the popular Christian song that is going around right now. I won't complain. But Job replies, that is hard to do when you are as mad as blazes and what has happened, and you need some comforting for what can't be comforted. Job's trust in God had taken a huge hit, and to make matters worse, Job's friends end up saying to him, you know, Job, this happened to you, it's really your fault. You did something, Job, to bring this on yourself. How many of you have ever been in deep grief? All of us. And there is always that one person who comes to you and says, oh, they're better off in heaven. I don't even have to imagine what your thoughts were because I know what mine are when people say those kinds of things to me. So Job is physically and emotionally devastated. Job's friends are insensitive and critical, and God is nowhere to be found. God is silent. So shouldn't Job just realize that his entreaties are falling on deaf ears? Shouldn't Job just understand that he's better off being quiet and enduring the pain before something worse befalls him? Or is beaten, battered, boil-covered, terrified Job, his cattle dead, his children dead, his wife dead, Is Job standing firm in his relationship with God by insisting that the one who made him, the one who blessed him, now come forth and give some meaning as to what is happening to him? Job stands up to God at the same time affirming, I know that when this time of testing is done, I shall come out as pure gold. Job is looking forward in history and explaining and exclaiming, like Carl Sagan, God, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Job is referencing Albert Einstein, who said, blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth. Talk to me, God. Job understands that to trust and to obey also means to question. We have to stand up and call God out sometimes on our complaints. And the Hebrews knew that. The Psalms, the Hebrew book of worship, is full of texts like Psalms 139, which says, when will you slay the wicked, O God? Moses said to God in the 11th chapter of Numbers, why have you been so hard on your servant? Psalm 77 says, I cry aloud to God that he may hear me. And so Job cries out, today also my complaint is bitter. God's hand is heavy despite my groaning. I was thinking of those who were killed in the limo accident in New York, among whom were those 4 daughters from one family. And I remembered a story that many of you know. Horatio Spafford was a wealthy lawyer in Chicago. However, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 ruined him financially. In addition to that, his only son died of scarlet fever when he was 6 years old. So Spafford had planned to sell what little holdings he had left and sail to Europe with his wife and 4 daughters to get a new start. But a prospective business deal called Horatio Spafford to stay behind and send his wife and his 4 daughters on ahead of him. About a week or 2 into the cruise, he received a 2-word telegram from his wife. And the 2 words simply said, saved alone. The ship on which his wife and his daughters were traveling collided with another sea vessel in the Atlantic Ocean, and all 4 daughters were drowned. Spafford later sailed on to England himself, but in his anguish and his anger and his grief and his terror, he insisted on sailing over the same nautical route and talked the captain into taking him to the exact point in the ocean where his beloved girls had lost their lives. It was there that he poured out his soul to God, asking, why? Until heaven answered him, and Spafford could finally pen these lyrics. When peace, like a river, attends my way, when sorrow, like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, you have taught me to say, it is well with my soul. Shaking in our boots, we stand up to God crying, when will you make it well with our souls? As people of faith and also people of ideas, our growing ability to ask God hard questions is change and revolution that is destroying the unquestioning loyalty of earlier worship traditions. Our questions are breaking down the unflinching loyalty of earlier ways of worship. In 2,100 years, we have learned that evil finds its genesis not so much, as the writer of Job wrote, in a silent, mysterious God, as much as it finds its genesis in evil systems that seek to control us. Evil systems that seek to control us. For instance, it is true that if we give a person a fish, they will not be hungry. And if we teach a person to fish, they can provide food for themselves. But more and more, we are understanding on our international journeys that the sharing of fish can be hampered when powerful systems build fences and walls around the fishing waters. Sylvia Nielsen-Ioka brought me a wonderfully interesting article that many of you probably read about the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has a pope that seems so gentle and so lovely and so ecumenical, reaching out to other denominations in his thinking. In addition, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis, is the first Jesuit to be pope and the first pope born outside of Europe since the 8th century. It is no wonder that he is known as the people's pope. But his closeness to the people, his availability to his people, may be the very reason that Catholics are, like Job, criticizing the Pope and standing up to God as never before. People young and people old are finding their voices to say, God, is church really church if the table does not make my friends welcome, no matter who they are and no matter who they love? God, is the church really church when towering female theologians cannot become Catholic priests? God, survivors of abuse by priests are demanding, God, is church really church when an abuser priest is simply moved to a new parish while a child survivor of abuse is left to heal as best they can, if they can? Every day, you and I witness overwhelming evil. People run out of their ancestral homes to countries that don't want them. People left to starve after natural disasters. Hate and prejudice against so many groups. People killed for being different. Not just tortured, but killed. And yet truth and justice continue to cry out. Cry out to whom? Stand up to whom? The book of Job presents a righteous man brought down by evil. But the book of Job also affirms the presence of an enigmatic God. God is there and God speaks, giving up none of God's mystery, but promising in our deepest, darkest grief never to leave us. We still cry out, why is there evil? Why? Why? And I suspect the answer will never be agreed upon by mortals. And that inability to agree upon evil's nature may be the very stimulant that allows evil to thrive. But we who are a little lower than the angels know that when we face up to systemic evil, when we love and forgive those who are hard to love and forgive for whatever reason, and when we love ourselves just as we are and through whatever we are going, we are standing up to God and demanding to know, is she welcome? Is he welcome? Am I welcome? And when we do that, another part of the mysterious God is revealed, and another part, and another part. And in the blinding light of that revelation, we see our faces reflected back to us, and we rejoice. We are included too. Let's pray. God, we come not understanding just as we are without one plea. But you've never turned us away. We don't know why. And you have bid us to come boldly before you, and so we do. Frightened, yes, we are. But we know that your presence is transformative. And so we cry out, and once again, wait for you to assure us. Thank you for that relationship. In your Son's name we pray.